it does not involve cash bonds anymore. And in many cases, when a bond is set, it is only a fraction required compared to what is the actual consequence if a perpetrator, for example, somebody who has allegedly committed a crime, been charged, ends up not showing up for a court date. So, Madam Speaker, there's a whole host of issues that need to be addressed here to ensure, and C9 addresses one small aspect of that related to a terrible instance. There are so many other things as well, though, that have to be addressed to restore that trust in our institutions.
The honourable member will have 5 minutes in questions and comments after oral questions. Statements by members. The honourable member for Ottawa Centre.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for acknowledging me. As we coming to an end to Small Business Week, let me take you on a very quick tour of incredible small businesses in my community of Ottawa Centre. Madam Speaker, there is Devinder Chaudhary, owner of the Ayana restaurant in downtown Ottawa, who's changing the restaurant industry by paying his staff a living wage. Then there's Paula Napos and Beandigan Cafe at Lansdowne Park, who is reinventing the coffee house model with an Indigenous spin. And Speaker, not to mention Justina Borowaska at Vidal Touch of Europe in Westboro, who's bringing authentic European cuisine in Ottawa, and there are so many more examples of small businesses like that in my community of Ottawa Centre. Speaker, I'm also proud to see new spaces emerging across my community to support small local entrepreneurs from equity-deserving communities. Over the past year, we've seen the Black Entrepreneurs Knowledge Hub at Carleton University School of Business and the Adawe Indigenous Business Hub to support young Indigenous entrepreneurs. Congratulations to them all. Thank you.
The honourable member for Hastings Lennox Addington.
Today I want to welcome and can give congratulations to one of my constituents, Teresa Bailey, and her co-author, Terry Turcott of Ottawa, for the recent publication of Hockey Moms, The Heart of the Game. This book is a collection of insightful stories from the perspective of Canadian hockey moms and celebrate the foundational strength that these women provide to families and hockey programs across Canada. This book is shifting the narrative of hockey in Canada to the potential ahead that results from diversity, inclusion, and the common thread we, as hockey moms, and all Canadians value and share: the love of our children and the love of the game. I trust this House will join me in congratulating Teresa and Terry for this monumental milestone. Having grown up in Madoc, I know she has made Hastings, Lennox, and Addington very proud. Congratulations.
Just a reminder that the use of props is not allowed, so for future reference. The honourable member for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we reach the end of Small Business Week, I want to speak and to thank our local small businesses employees and to recognize that although Small Business Week is coming to an end, their work is continuing. These entrepreneurs and their teams are the backbone of our communities and local economies. While supporting financial well-being, they also bring community together and support local initiatives, even providing emotional well-being at times. In my riding of Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill, we are so fortunate to have small businesses to do just that. There's so many, but recently I had the pleasure to visit Jay at the STEAM project in Richmond Hill, Henny at Ziba Salon, Rosa at Royal Rose Arts, Fiona at Coconut Village Spa, and Nair at Future Gadgets. Our government has supported these businesses and so many others through the pandemic. As part of our plan to build a robust economy that abandons no one, creates good-paying jobs, and greens our economy, we will continue to support small and local businesses. We are committed to growing the economy of today and tomorrow for all Canadians.
The honourable member for Courtenay Albany.
Madam Speaker, this summer we lost Robert Evans Skelly, a great parliamentarian and a fearless champion for the rights of women, Indigenous and working people. Bob's legacy will be everlasting. He was elected to the BC legislature 5 times as the NDP MLA for Alberni, and to this House as the member from Comox, Alberni for 1 term. He succeeded Dave Barrett as the leader of the NDP in British Columbia, a role that he filled with dignity and vigour. In his maiden speech in 1972, he called for the province to recognize the rights of Indigenous people, and he carried the same message to the House of Commons when he arrived here in 1988. Bob died of Parkinson's disease, which was first diagnosed in 1998. I'm sure I speak for all members in expressing our deepest condolences to Bob's wife, Alex, and their family. May he rest in peace.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Glengarry Plus Prescott Russell. Madam Speaker, I rise in the House to recognize the end of Small Business Week. I would like to thank Claude Thériault, the owner of Claude Thériault Electronics, and Claude Desjardins, owner of the Desjardins Convenience Store, two small businesses that I had the chance to work for when I was young. Hard work and customer service are two values that I learned in these companies and continue to value today. Our SMEs have come through the pandemic, and it was difficult for some. At the Gala of Excellence last weekend, we recognized several companies. I'd like to congratulate all of the finalists. I congratulate the winners, including Arboris, Touque de Brou, L'Orignal Packing, Studio Chantaly, Impression Design, Mini-Jeux Gonflables, and finally, congratulations to Yves Bertillon for winning an award as well. Madam Speaker, let's continue to support our SMEs. Let's buy local. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins-Lévis. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I'd like to honour the memory of a remarkable man, Mr. Gilbert Laliberté, who passed away on October 11th. He had a full life, both in his family and professionally. He was well-rooted in Honfleur, the municipality, where he always lived with his beloved wife, Rose. They had 5 beautiful children who gave them, over the generations, 33 descendants. He carried on the family tradition by taking over his father's farm and by improving it. The farm is prosperous and is said to be an example of cleanliness. He also operated a large sugar bush. His business was so well run that on 3 occasions, Madam Speaker, he won the Order of Agricultural Merit, an achievement that few of his colleagues can boast about. The model is so inspiring that his 3 sons will soon be taking up farming. But Mr. Laliberté wasn't satisfied with just focusing on the success of his business and the well-being of his family. He was also mayor of Honfleur, a municipality located in the middle of Bellechasse. He was also a judge for the Order of Agricultural Merit. Today I want to congratulate
L'honorable député de Winnipeg North.
the Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Happy Diwali. Diwali is a wonderful celebration across Canada, coast to coast to coast. Many will recognize Diwali as a festival of lights. Think in terms of light over darkness, good over evil, knowledge over ignorance. Canada is a diverse nation, second to no other in terms of our heritage. So I'd like to encourage members, in fact all Canadians, to take a moment and note. October 24, we celebrate Diwali and encourage people to participate in whatever way they can in that wonderful festival. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Nepean.
Madam Speaker, on September 30th, a suicide attack in Afghanistan killed 54, mostly girls and young women, and injured another 120. These were students belonging to Hazara community who were sitting for a practice university exam. Hazara community in Afghanistan is subject to multiple forms of discrimination, negatively affecting their economic, social, culture, and human rights. A report by British parliamentarians stated that as a religious and ethnic minority, the Hazara community in Afghanistan are at serious risk of genocide. Since Taliban came back to power, the Hazara community members have been killed through targeted bombings of Hazara schools and places of worship. I call on Canada to condemn these killings and ask the authorities in Afghanistan to protect the Hazara community. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member for Haliburton, Florida Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, in Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, people are worried about how they will get to work, heat their homes, and put food on the table. Douglas wrote to me about the cost of diesel, and I quote, "I couldn't believe that diesel in Lindsay ranges from $2.16 to $2.40. With diesel being so high, grocery prices will rise even more and make it more unaffordable for the low and middle class to buy food. When will the federal government lower the tax at the gas pumps?" End quote. At the end of her rope, Kathy expressed her anxiety to me in a long email, and I quote, "I work hard for the little money I get, and soon we'll have to figure out what to purchase, fuel, groceries, or heat. I know the Prime Minister doesn't have to worry about those things," end quote. Speaker, it's clear Canadians cannot afford this Prime Minister and its costly coalition with the NDP. The new Conservative leader will put people like Douglas and Kathy first, their paychecks, their savings, their home, and their country.
For Canada Carlton.
Madam Speaker, on Monday, Nokia Canada announced their intention to redevelop their 26-acre campus in the Canada North Technology Park into a sustainable, accessible, mixed-use, corporate, residential, and commercial hub. The new R&D hub will help secure Canada's position as a global leader in the green digital future by broadening expertise in 5G, cybersecurity, and AI. Canada is already home to one of Nokia's largest R&D sites with more than 2,300 employees. With this redevelopment and $340 million investment, an additional 340 high-paying jobs will be created in my community. I'm proud of our government's commitment in supporting this important project with up to $40 million in strategic innovation funding, which means more jobs and more Canadian IP. The future is digital, and it's happening right here in Canada's largest technology park in Canada. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Bravo, Dan.
The honourable member for Kenora.
Madam Speaker, inflation is at record highs, and this month, food inflation has jumped to over 11%. This is something that we are feeling, especially across Northern Ontario. In communities in my riding, people are now having to choose between heating their homes, filling their vehicles' gas tanks, or putting food on the table. Madam Speaker, in Sandy Lake, one individual can of beans is now costing $5, and this is even after the government has applied the Nutrition North subsidy. It is all a creation of this government's policies, and it is clear that Canadians can no longer afford this Prime Minister and his costly coalition with the NDP. Madam Speaker, it is time for a Conservative government that will put the people first, that will cut taxes, that will reduce spending, and give those struggling across Northern Ontario some much-needed relief.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, yesterday at the Public Safety Committee, Edmonton Police Chief Dale McPhee said that the Liberals' handgun freeze is not only a bad idea, but will undermine public safety by increasing smuggling and black market activity. He said instead the focus ought to be on targeting the criminals who pull the trigger. Chief McPhee's approach is in stark contrast to the Liberals' approach with their soft-on-crime, do-no-time Bill C-5 that eliminates mandatory jail time for serious gun crime. This, all the while the Liberals target law-abiding firearms owners with not only a useless but potentially harmful handgun freeze. The Liberals should heed the advice of Chief McPhee, go after the criminals, and leave law-abiding firearms owners alone.
The honourable member for Winnipeg South.
Well, Madam Speaker, it is with sadness that I announce the recent passing of a dear friend and beloved Manitoban, Dr. Krishnamurti Dakshinamurti. Born in 1928 in Vellore, India, he was a student activist and an earlier follower of Mahatma Gandhi. Dr. Dakshinamurti later challenged this life-changing experience by founding the Mahatma Gandhi Centre of Canada to promote human rights. He earned a PhD in biochemistry and became a world-renowned scientist and scholar, inspiring and mentoring generations of students and doctors. He was a pillar of numerous cultural organizations, including the Manohar Performing Arts of Canada, and was a passionate humanitarian who worked on countless fundraising campaigns for local and international disasters. In 2020, for his distinguished service, he was awarded the Order of Manitoba. My deepest sympathies to Dr. Dakshinamurti's family, as well as to his legions of friends and followers who are gathering on October 25th to honor the life of a great soul. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
Last week, I had the honor of attending a groundbreaking on the largest affordable housing development in London's history. Vision Soho is a coalition of 6 nonprofit affordable housing providers convened by the London Community Foundation, and they will build more than 650 units as a mixed-use community. This is needed more than ever in my community, as Londoners are priced out of their neighborhoods. In the last few years, the average home cost has more than doubled in London. Home ownership is now only a dream for too many. The city's list of individuals using homelessness supports grew tenfold, and more than 6,000 people are now on our social housing wait list. The financialization of housing in Canada has caused a crisis in my community, which of course started because the Liberal government cancelled the National Affordable Housing Program in 1993. But I want to thank my NDP colleagues for pushing for a study of this financialization in the HuMA committee. I call on this government to take the real action needed to make housing a right, not a commodity.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Madam Speaker, Homelessness Night is an event to raise awareness about homelessness, poverty, and social issues that more and more Quebecers are grappling with. The 33rd edition of the event is taking place tonight and will be celebrated in more than 21 municipalities across Quebec. This year's theme, No Roof Over Your Head, No Choice. Single mothers, people suffering from mental health problems, Indigenous people, seniors, in short, the most vulnerable members of our society find themselves on the street due to a lack of adequate support, including affordable, secure housing. I want to highlight the excellent work of the various people working with these vulnerable people, especially in Quebec, and to my friends in Longueuil. I accompany them with humanism and perseverance. Their work enables people to live in dignity, and I want to say a huge thank you to them for their dedication and their exceptional commitment to this mission. From the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Madam Speaker, yesterday recordings were released of the infamous April 28th phone call with RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki and her subordinates. We have been told that these recordings were destroyed, but a partial copy was found. In that recording, the Commissioner admits that she was working closely with the Prime Minister and the Minister of Public Safety to release confidential information on an active investigation into the Nova Scotia mass shooting. Earlier this summer, Commissioner Lucki testified to Parliament that, quote, she was not directed to publicly release information about weapons used by the perpetrator to help advance pending gun control legislation. The recordings contradict her testimony. In fact, she admitted that the minister's office requested her to release this information. She admitted that she needed to apologize to the Prime Minister and the Minister because she failed to get this information released. Political interference into the RCMP investigation by this government and the Commissioner are unacceptable. It's time for accountability. When can we expect a resignation?
The Honourable Member for Brampton East.
Madam Speaker, today I rise to wish everyone celebrating in Brampton East and across Canada a very happy Diwali and Bandi Chhor Divas. It's a time where South Asian communities come together to celebrate the victory of good over evil. During this time, friends and family come together to light diyas, gather for fireworks, visit local gurdwaras, mandirs, and temples to pray and seek blessings. During this time and many festivals throughout the year, organizations such as the Seva Food Bank, the Peel Regional Police, alongside local grocery stores, come together to support those most in need. A huge thanks to their teams for their dedication to serving our communities. My family and I look forward to being with the community at the local gurdwaras and the many events over the coming weeks. I know Ava and Maya are excited about the unlimited prashad, and we all enjoy the company of the community and connecting with neighbors during our visits. I ask everyone in this house to please join me in wishing everyone celebrating across Canada a very happy Diwali and Bandi Chhor Divas.
Oral questions. Questions orales. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
On a entendu.
Yesterday, we heard the recording of a phone call. It revealed that the RCMP Commissioner was experiencing political pressure, not only from the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, but the Prime Minister himself. When it came to the inquiry in the largest mass shooting in Canada's history, 22 people were killed. It also contradicts statements made in the House from the Minister of Emergency Preparedness. Will he resign? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, please allow me to express again our most sincere condolences.
Act de violence insolable.
It was an odious act of violence.
Dans mes pensées.
I am keeping all of the victims in mind. A clear principle of our democracy is that our government respects the law and did not interfere in a police investigation.
Of the opposition.
Well, the Minister of Emergency Preparedness said, quote, "At no point did our government pressure or interfere with the operational decisions of the RCMP, including their communication strategy." Yet, only 10 days after the biggest mass shooting in Canadian history, the Commissioner of the RCMP was recorded saying, "It was a request that I got from the Minister's office." Ooh. Furthermore, she said she was waiting for a call from the Prime Minister so that she could apologize for not having released the information that the politicians wanted out. They wanted this information out so that they could advance their partisan agenda. Will they resign?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam President, the member opposite knows really well that one of the most fundamental principles of our democracy is that politicians do not interfere in police investigations or police operations. Let me be absolutely clear. We believe that that is a sacrosanct principle of our democracy, and at no moment ever our government has ever interfered in police investigation or police operation, nor we will ever do so. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
And yet a recording from the Commissioner of the RCMP shows that that is exactly what they did. It was, quote, "It was a request that I got from the Minister's office." And I shared with the Minister that it was in fact going to be in the release, and it wasn't. I'm now sitting on a request in my phone that the Minister wants to speak with me. She says further, "I'm waiting for a call from the Prime Minister so that I can apologize." Wow. Apologize for not releasing sensitive investigative information to advance the Liberal Party's partisan agenda. With this revelation of falsehoods stated by this Minister in this House, will he resign?
Here, here. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, let me repeat once again, at no point did our government attempt to direct or otherwise interfere with police operations. Let me quote what Commissioner herself stated to testimony to parliamentarians, and I quote, "Let me be clear. I did not interfere in the investigation. I did not receive direction, and I was not influenced by government officials regarding the public release of information, and more importantly, on the direction of the investigation. I ensured that operational independence was maintained in all my interactions with government as I do today." This is a direct quote from the
L'Honorable Chef de l'Opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Another quote in a recorded conversation. So she too has stated one thing here and the opposite there. Similarly, with the ArriveCan $54 million scandal, we see the government saying things that contradict the facts. They released a document to the House of Commons saying that Think On Inc. had received a $1.2 million contract for experimentation of mobile QR scanning. Yet the CEO said yesterday he never got any money. In fact, they don't even work in the field. So if his company didn't get the money, who did?
L'Honorable Leader du Gouvernement en chef.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Matters. Obviously, the government ensures that contracts are handed to the highest standards. There are questions about this contract that are being looked at. Certainly, we want to make sure there are answers. But I will say, Madam Speaker, that what we did when the country was in a situation of crisis, when the opposition was calling for the border to be closed, is ensure that we brought forward an app that allowed the movement of people safely during that crisis. And that is something that worked and was extremely effective, Madam Speaker.
Hear, hear.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Making somebody rich. We just don't yet know who. So the government released a document in the House of Commons saying that Think On Inc. got $1.2 million in ArriveCan contracts. Yesterday, the CEO said, we have received no money from the CBSA. He further said, we're not even remotely in that space. In other words, they don't even do the work that was paid for. So this company did not get the $1.2 million. Two questions. Who did get the money, and where is it now?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madam Speaker, CBSA is looking into this matter. They're aware of concerns with respect to the contract. I can assure the honourable member opposite that in all matters with respect to contracts that we adhere to the absolute highest standards and demand those standards in every interaction that the government interacts in. But again, I will point out, Madam Speaker, the imperative nature of the action that the ArriveCan app was able to facilitate. We were in a situation where the opposition was calling for the border to be closed. We wanted to make sure that Canadians could travel safely. We introduced an app that facilitated that in a time of crisis and made sure that Canadians could travel.
Honorable député de Saint-Jean.
Madame la Présidente, Radio-Canada révèle...
Madam Speaker, Radio-Canada revealed that the federal government launched a witch hunt for journalistic sources in order to punish a whistleblower. They want to find out who revealed that the federal government was appointing a unilingual Anglophone as CEO of the Museum of Canadian History. The government could have looked in the mirror and asked why it was still making unilingual Anglophone appointments, but no. Instead, they combed through emails and called 82 employees to find out who talked. How is it that the government is not bothered about making a unilingual Anglophone appointment, but that the public knows about it? The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. I will have her note that the president of the Federation of Journalists in Quebec declared during that interview that public officials can't use their work tools to disseminate confidential information. Obviously, we're working to move the French fact forward. I have worked in the past to make sure that culture is supported throughout Canada, especially in Quebec. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, the Federation of Professional Journalists for Quebec is worried that Ottawa is dissuading whistleblowers when they should be protected. Canada has the worst whistleblower law in the world, according to the International Bar Association. It's 50th out of 50. That's why the Bloc Québécois introduced Bill C-90 to better protect public servants who come forward. Will the government support it instead of going on a whistleblower hunt, even a witch hunt, directed at its own employees? The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Canada is one of the most transparent countries on the planet. You have only to look at the reports by Transparency International. We are one of the countries that makes the most room for journalists. We have very important processes when it comes to divulging information. We're proud of that, and we will continue to work to continue to be one of the best in the world. Thank you.
New Westminster.
The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby. The lack of leadership of this Liberal government in health is putting the lives of children at risk. A disaster. That's what's happening in the emergency room at Saint-Justine Hospital in Montreal. Due to a lack of space, children have to wait in the corridors all alone before being treated. Health workers are overwhelmed. The quality of care is deteriorating, according to doctors. The Liberal government must act. It is urgent. When will the Liberals show leadership and finally invest the necessary funds in health to save lives now? The Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you, Madam Speaker. and I am very pleased to receive this question, and I thank the member for asking it. Our health workers are indeed experiencing a crisis throughout the entire country. They are tired. Many of them have left the profession. Many of them are ill. Many of them are thinking about leaving in the next months or years. This is a crisis that we have to admit exists. We have to treat it. We have to work with provinces and territories to do it. And that's why over the last several months, we have engaged in significant talks to do so. We will have more talks in the future, and we will work with all of our colleagues, including ministers of health throughout the country.
They need to start funding health care now. Madam Speaker, Nova Scotians lost loved ones, and an entire community was devastated by a mass shooting. People deserve honest answers from this government. Yesterday, in recordings released by the Commission, it's clear that the former Minister of Public Safety and the RCMP Commissioner's stories don't add up. If the Liberal government interfered with an investigation into the worst mass shooting in Canadian history for their own political gain, Canadians need to know. So who is telling the truth, the Minister or the RCMP Commissioner?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I want to remind the member opposite again, and I'm sure he's aware of this most important principle in our democracy, which is that politicians do not interfere in police operations. They do not interfere in police investigations. That's a sacrosanct principle, Madam Speaker, that our government will always live by. At no point ever the minister or the government interfered in a matter of police operation or investigation, nor it will ever do so. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Madam Speaker, the newly released audio recordings of the RCMP Commissioner confirms that the Minister pressured the Commissioner to release sensitive information about the ongoing investigation into the worst mass killing in our history. Wow. By requesting this information be released to further the Liberal political agenda, the Minister politically interfered in the RCMP investigation, and he misled a parliamentary committee about it. For this, the Minister must resign. Will he resign today?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I will restate this really important principle because I think it's worth repeating, that in our democratic part of the system, politicians do not interfere in police operations or police investigations. At no point did our government instruct anyone to release any information, because we would never violate the sacrosanct principle of interfering in a police investigation or police operation, as was the case in this circumstance.
The Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
The former Minister of Public Safety misled a parliamentary committee on the record, Madam Speaker. He said he was not aware the Commissioner would release sensitive information, and he said he never asked her to reveal that information, but both claims are now proven to be completely misleading with the new audio recording. Worse yet, the Minister knew the release of this information would jeopardize the investigation into the worst mass killing in Canadian history, and this was all for Liberal political gain, Madam Speaker. He must resign today. Will he resign?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, at no point did our government attempt to direct or otherwise interfere the police operations that was taking place in that tragic incident that took place in Nova Scotia. And let me re-quote what the Commissioner said in a parliamentary committee on July 25th of this year. She stated, Speaker, let me be clear, I did not interfere in the investigation, I did not receive direction, and I was not influenced by government officials regarding the public release of information, and more importantly, on the direction of the investigation. I ensured that operational independence...
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Commissioner Luckey told the Nova Scotia RCMP that she wanted the details of the makes and the models of the weapons used in Canada's most deadly mass shooting released. Why? Because the minister pressured her to do so. We know they spoke about it. He knew it would jeopardize the investigation, but the minister had legislation coming, and this was part of a communications exercise for him. It was not about the investigation, the victims, or public safety. He played politics with a mass shooting investigation. What time today will he resign?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, the independence of police operations is a key principle in our democracy and one that our government deeply respects. At no time did our government attempt to interfere in police operations. That has never taken place. It's a sacrosanct principle of our democracy, and we'll always live by it.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Madam Speaker, in an accountable of an RCMP commissioner working with a minister to cover up the politicization of the biggest mass killing in Canadian history would result in immediate resignation. Not only did the minister mislead the House about knowing what we've all heard on tape, the minister was advised that releasing this information would jeopardize the investigation, and he asked for it to be done anyway. He put politics above the safety of Canadians and then covered it up. So what time today will he resign?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, what happened in Nova Scotia by way of that mass shooting is an absolute tragedy. Innocent people lost their lives. Our focus has been to ensure that through this inquiry,
Can we listen to the answers the same way we listen to the questions, please? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Our focus, Madam Speaker, has been through the inquiry to make sure that we learn the lessons from how to prevent such mass shootings ever to take place in any part of Canada. That investigation was led by the RCMP. The government did not interfere in that investigation, but because that is a fundamental principle of our democracy, politicians do not interfere with police operations.
Honorable député de Louis-Saint-Laurent.
Madame la Présidente, cette affaire est...
Madam Speaker, this is very serious. During this tragedy in Halifax, the government claims it never interfered in the process, and it's completely false. Yesterday, a recording was made public about a meeting that happened a few days after that situation where we clearly see that the government interfered. When the commissioner said... I flagged it because it was a request from the minister's office, and I told the minister that the information would be released, and then it wasn't. It was a request. I told the minister. When will the minister resign? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, the independence of police operations is part of our democracy. Our government has deep respect for this. At no point did our government try to interfere in the investigation. The Honourable Member for Louis-Saint-Laurent. I will repeat. We got this information publicly yesterday. I flag it because it was a request I got from the minister's office, and I told the minister the information would be released, and then it wasn't. I told the minister. What did we find out? That the commissioner at the RCMP was waiting for the Prime Minister's call for what? To apologize. It has no place at all in a self-respecting democracy. When will the minister resign? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The member in our democracy, politicians do not interfere in police operations or police investigations, as has been the case in this matter. We did not interfere in a police operation or police investigation. That has been confirmed by the commissioner herself when she testified before a parliamentary committee in July of this year, where she clearly said that she was not asked to direct the investigation, nor she was, and she worked hard to maintain the independence of that investigation.
L'honorable député de Joliette.
Madame la Présidente, l'occupation de camions...
Madam Speaker, the truckers' occupation of Ottawa dragged on because the federal government blocked any opportunity to intervene for 3 weeks. We knew that when the City of Ottawa asked for 1,800 police officers as reinforcements, the federal government did not respond. And then we also learned that the Mayor of Ottawa, Jim Wattens, asked the federal government several times to organize mediation. That was also refused. So for 3 weeks, no police reinforcements, no mediation, no progress. Why did the federal government block any possibility of intervention for 3 weeks while the population was held hostage? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I can tell you that the federal government was engaged in ensuring that we end the illegal occupation of Ottawa and the illegal closure of our borders as well. And we worked very closely with local police authorities, which were responsible to provide policing here in case of Ottawa, for instance, and by providing resources as they were needed. In the end of the day, we needed to invoke the Emergencies Act because things were not getting done, and the result is that the occupation did come to an end.
Bravo. The
honourable member for Joliette.
Pas du tout.
No, not at all. Managing a crisis is a matter of hours or days, not 3 weeks. After 3 weeks of inaction, it was not the emergency measures that lifted the siege of Ottawa, it was the police. It was the 1,800 reinforcements, even 1,900 reinforcements that the City of Ottawa had been asking for the whole time. The second Ottawa got its reinforcements, an operation was launched, and not even 48 hours later, the streets of Ottawa were empty. It was the police who freed Ottawa from the siege. Why for 3 weeks did the federal government not ensure that the police were mobilized and coordinated? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I can tell you from first-hand experience, being the local member of Parliament for the area, that the occupation of downtown Ottawa was extremely distressing for the residents who live in the downtown core and for many businesses. The federal government worked extremely closely with the municipal government and the provincial counterparts in making sure that all the resources that were needed were provided for so that we can end that occupation as quickly as possible. We all wish that occupation would have not lasted for three weeks, and that's why we had to invoke the Emergencies Act to put an end to the occupation and to make sure that our borders are not blockaded.
Excellent. The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
Yesterday, the Globe and Mail revealed that the Liberals are claiming millions in payments to vendors for their ArriveCan boondoggle that never actually happened. A $54 million app with millions unaccounted for. Canadians are left wondering if there are more fake ArriveCan payments listed. First, it was Think On Inc. Then later in the day, Ernst & Young came forward to say this government is claiming false billing. So, does the minister, do these Liberals want to revise the figures that they signed off on?
Here, here, here. The honourable leader of the government in the House.
Madam Speaker, I answered this earlier. I'm happy to again. The CBSA is taking a look at the contract. They're aware that there are questions. The Government of Canada and this government in all contracts conducts itself to the highest standard and demands the highest standards in every contract that it enters into. But with respect to the ArriveCan app, I would point out that the members opposite wanted to close the border, didn't support the app, and frankly were not helpful during that period of time and constantly changing their positions. We ensured that people were able to enter the country and that goods and services were able to flow in a time of crisis. Madam Speaker, will continue to be there for Canadians.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
What Canadians don't find helpful is that these Liberals have no intention of telling the truth. So here are some facts for them. They said the app would cost $80,000. It ended up costing $54 million. Then CBSA and these Liberals, these ministers, signed off on payments, saying that companies like Think On and companies like Ernst & Young received payments from the government. These companies never received a dime. So money is missing. We have two questions for these Liberals. Who's lying and who got rich?
The honourable leader of the government in the House.
Madam Speaker, here are the facts. During an unprecedented time when the country was being rocked by COVID, and we needed to be able to make sure that people, and they're saying it doesn't matter, it absolutely does matter, that people were able to cross the border, that we were able on an urgent basis to create a system that kept them safe and ensured that they were able to continue to have mobility. In every step of the pandemic, whether or not it's in supports or whether or not it's in mobility, we were there for Canadians. As crises occur, our government will respond and will always do so to the highest standard.
L'honorable député de Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier.
Madame la Présidente, agir urgemment.
Madam Speaker, acting urgently doesn't mean recklessly spending taxpayers' money. This government has gotten us used to doubting its integrity. After the ventilators of a former Liberal MP and the land at Roxham Road, it's the ArriveCan app which cost $54 million. Experts say they could have done it for $250,000. We're being laughed at. Even worse, the government gave $1.2 million to a business which says it did not receive any money. A simple question. Who did this government give the $1.2 million to? The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House. As I've already explained, the agency responsible for the contract understands full well that there are questions. In every situation, we will make sure that the government acts responsibly. We will answer questions and offer the oversight our system requires.
Honorable député de Lévis.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lobinière. Madam Speaker, ArriveCan cost a fortune to Canadians, and it certainly does not work on the level of a $50 million that it cost. A good programmer could easily have done it for less than $250,000. Liberal incompetence cost $50 million again. Why is this Liberal government accumulating scandal after scandal? The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madame la Présidente, le député dans l'autre côté.
Madam Speaker, the member on the other side asked a question in an interesting way, and I will answer directly. That this situation was extremely difficult for our country. And it's not just a matter of the cost of the software. It was a matter of building an application around the software, which was very important. It was essential at that time for the government to act quickly and effectively. And that's what we did.
Honourable Member for North Island Powell River.
Madam Speaker, hospital emergency rooms in Port Hardy, Alert Bay and Port McNeill have been closing repeatedly for the past few months because there isn't enough staff to keep them open. Residents of the North Island are extremely concerned that the emergency rooms are not there when they need them. Underfunding of healthcare by both Conservative and Liberal governments have left rural communities behind. Will this government provide significant, stable and long-term funding for healthcare and address this crisis?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and we're obviously very focused and very mindful of these very severe difficulties that healthcare workers across the country, including in the members' riding, have been facing for a long time, and exacerbated obviously during COVID-19. That's why we're going to work together to continue to do that with increased funds.
May I interrupt the Honourable Minister? Do we want to listen to the answer for the Minister? The Minister is answering and trying to provide an answer to the question. If we keep being interrupted, I'll skip over the next question. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm sure the member wants to hear the answer because she's very focused on the problems in her riding, and I congratulate her for that. And that's why over the last few weeks and months we've been investing increased resources through a $2 billion additional investment to reduce backlogs, another $1 billion to support healthcare workers in long-term care settings, and I could add more.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Madam Speaker, people in Canada don't need more talk. This week, media reported that the emergency wait times at Edmonton's Stollery Children's Hospital has reached 17 hours.
Wow.
One ER doctor revealed that patients are dying in the waiting room. It's unacceptable that the Liberals avoid taking any responsibility for this crisis. They are standing by while Conservative premiers are underfunding the healthcare system the Canadians need. And to make things worse, in Alberta, Daniel Smith is musing about scrapping public health care in our province.
Wow.
Canadians' lives are at risk. When is the government going to take action?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And all Canadians, and certainly Albertans, need and deserve the support of the federal government, including in supporting healthcare workers in Alberta and across Canada. We are obviously very mindful of the pressures and the intentions and sometimes the actions around privatizing our healthcare system. Canadians want to have access to the Canada public healthcare system in a manner which is supportive of the principles of accessibility, affordability, universality, and all of those principles that all Canadians, including Albertans, want us to support together.
Honourable Member for the Northwest Territories.
Madam Speaker, everyone in Canada should have access to safe, clean drinking water. Could the Minister of Indigenous Services Canada update this House on the recent progress?
Honourable Member, can we let the member ask the question without commentary? The Honourable Member for Northwest Territories.
Madam Speaker, everyone in Canada should have access to safe, clean drinking water. Could the Minister of Indigenous Services Canada update this House on the recent progress that has been made in lifting long-term drinking water advisories in First Nations communities? Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Northwest Territories for his advocacy and hard work. Madam Speaker, just last week, Sashago Lake lifted their long-term boil water advisory, and this is a testament to their dedication and their hard work, and of course our commitment. Since 2015, 136 boil water advisories have been lifted. Madam Speaker, there are 31 more to go, each with its own project team and plan. And Madam Speaker, we will not rest till we lift those water advisories. This is important to all Canadians. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Emergency Preparedness repeatedly told this House that, quote, at no point did our government pressure or interfere in the operational decisions of the RCMP, including their communications strategy. Audio recordings of Commissioner Lucky state, quote, it was the request that I got from the Minister's office, and I shared with the Minister that it was going to be in the news release, and it wasn't. The Minister directly interfered in an RCMP investigation for the purpose of advancing their political agenda. When will the Minister resign for misleading Parliament?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, the members opposite can ask the same question as many different ways as possible. The answer remains the same, that in our democracy, one of the fundamental principles is that the government does not interfere in any police operation or police investigation.
The Honourable Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Madam Speaker, Commissioner Lucky told Parliament that, quote, she was not directed to publicly release information about weapons used to help advance pending gun control legislation. But we now have audio recordings where the Commissioner states, quote, does anyone know what's going on with the world of guns? They're trying to get legislation going. The Commissioner pressured her subordinates under direction from the Minister to advance the government's political agenda. In her own words, quote, she didn't come through for the Minister. The Commissioner misled Parliament. When will the government demand her resignation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I do want to again stress the fact that the Commissioner testified to parliamentarians at a committee in July where she said that I did not receive direction and I was not influenced by government officials regarding the public release of information. Speaker, she's stating exactly the practice, which is politicians do not interfere in police operation or police investigations. Our government abides by that really important principle, and at no time did the government interfere in a police investigation.
The Honourable Member for Langley Aldergrove.
Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister and the Constitution Coalition with the NDP is making life more expensive for all Canadians. People in British Columbia are deeply concerned about the rapid rise in the cost of living and now about the cost of home heating fuels. Madam Speaker, the last thing Canadians need is more inflationary taxation at this time. Will the Liberal government cancel their plans to triple taxes on home heating this winter?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madam Speaker, the Leader of the official opposition, quote, said that countries that are running higher inflation than Canada are, quote, dumb. And that list includes the U.S., Italy, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, and the entire Eurozone. Look, right now, when we're in a time of global crisis, when people are finding things hard, it doesn't matter that Canada has one of the lowest inflation rates in the world. We have to do everything that we can to help Canadians. And that's why I asked the member opposite why they won't support dental care for families that need that support. Why won't they support help for those who are low income, who are renting? Why do they refuse to support it? Worse, Madam Speaker, why do they not even let it pass through the House?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Elgin Middlesex, London.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The government is making life more expensive for everyone. I've heard from seniors living on a fixed income who are struggling to put food on the table. I received an email from a constituent concerned that the prices at a local grocery store are skyrocketing, but the portions are being decreased. Winter is coming and homes need to be kept warm. Canadians are cash-strapped. Will the Liberal government give Canadians a break and cancel their triple taxes on home heating this winter?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madam Speaker, what I find most unfortunate, that in a time of global turmoil, when people across the world are facing the impacts of not only inflation, but of climate change, that the government, the government which is taking action faces an opposition in the Conservatives that is raising anxiety, that is trying to amplify people's anxiety instead of providing solutions. And what are their solutions? To take something that they know gives more money back than it takes to fight climate change, and then to stand up against dental care for those families that need it, to stand against support for low-income families that are renting. Madam Speaker, that is not responsible.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. With the new pro-oil and gas policy Canada announced in Washington, things are shaping up for the Prime Minister to be named the oil patch's bestie once again. Yes, just like in March 2017 when the oil companies invited the Prime Minister to Texas to give him the prestigious Global Energy Leadership Award. Shell, BP, ExxonMobil, all the big oil companies were head over heels. This was their man. 5 years later, with Canada's new policy announcement in Washington, does the minister think his leader is way out in front to win the award again this year? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to announce to my colleague that the Prime Minister of Canada was named Man of the Year by the National Geographic magazine for all the work Canada is doing on protecting nature. This is not a random thing. If the UN turned towards us to organize the next UN conference on protecting biodiversity. It was supposed to happen in China, but when that was canceled, they turned to Canada because we're the ones doing the most to protect biodiversity and to fight climate change. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. So China and Canada, that makes for strange comparisons. Canada's announcement in Washington reminds us that Canada has not been praised abroad for its fight against climate change, but the Prime Minister did get an award from the oil patch. Equiterre and the Sierra Club have sued the Minister of the Environment for approving Bay du Nord. The Deputy Prime Minister told the whole world Canada was going to fast-track oil and gas projects, even at the risk of losing some political capital. With this government, should we believe what we see or what we hear? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to remind my colleague that in the last year alone, $15 billion was invested in electric batteries and vehicles in many projects, and many of those in Quebec. And when there was a recent announcement that chose Canada for a wind project. We are making a green transition. We're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in the energy transition in Canada. Thank you.
Speaker, Canada is experiencing an affordability crisis where 60% of Canadians are struggling to put food on the table. 20% of Canadians are dependent on food banks. Food inflation recently hit a 40-year high at 11.4%. Bread is up 22%. Cereal 17.9%. Baked goods 14%. The cause of this inflation, Madam Speaker? Hundreds of billions of dollars of reckless spending, most of which was not related to COVID. Madam Speaker, when will this Liberal government finally abandon its irresponsible policies of tax and spend and let Canadians have a full belly when they go to bed tonight?
Madam Speaker, what is responsible is pretending that a global problem that we have to take seriously is a problem that just exists in Canada. They might as well promise that the wind will stop blowing at our coastal borders if they were in government. The reality is we face global challenges just like every other country, and that it doesn't matter that we have one of the lowest rates. We need to take action. We need to provide support. It doesn't matter that we've lifted 2.7 million people out of poverty in the last 5 years. We have to do more. It doesn't matter that we have done this House has adopted legislation to help those that are in need, $500 with GST credit. Where are they on dental? Where are they on health?
The Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Madam Speaker, what does matter is the more this government spends, the more things cost. I would say that this government has spent like a drunken sailor, but quite frankly, that would bring intoxicated mariners into disrepute. After a wild bender of spending, this government has got up in a ditch and said, "We see the light of fiscal restraint." Madam Speaker, excuse my incredulity, but I'm sure that millions of Canadians share my skepticism. Will this government reassure Canadians and fully commit to the Leader of the Opposition's plan and legislate pay-as-you-go?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition, who called the U.S., Italy, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, and the entire Eurozone dumb because they have higher inflation rates than we do. What is the action that he was taking while these quote-unquote dumb governments were attempting to deal with global inflation? He was recommending that people invest in Bitcoin, that they take their precious savings and they invest in Bitcoin. Madam Speaker, those people would have lost absolutely everything. Now, I'm quite sure that international leaders have more tact and dignity to share their opinions about the Leader of the official opposition.
The Honourable Member for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Speaker, the Prime Minister and his costly coalition with the NDP is making life more expensive for Canadians. Media reports that Canadians who pay for natural gas or electricity can expect their bills to go up by 50, 100, even 300% this winter. Now, I don't know about you, but everybody I know uses electricity and they need to heat their family home. Let me be clear, warmth during a Canadian winter is not a luxury. Will the government cancel their plans to triple taxes on home heating?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Just like the Conservatives, Madam Speaker, believe that inflation is something that can just stop at the Canadian borders and we won't be affected by it, they also believe that climate change, and they're saying that we caused it, right? I mean, this is how ridiculous and preposterous their positions are. This is also their position on climate change. They want to pretend that climate change isn't going to cost tens and hundreds of billions of dollars. In fact, over the next 100 years, perhaps trillions of dollars. We just watched what happened in Atlantic Canada. We just watched what happened in Fiona. We need to take responsible leadership to protect this planet and at the same time make sure life is more affordable for Canadians, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Honourable Member for Saint Laurent.
Madam Speaker, it's Small Business Week. A chance to celebrate the contributions of Canadian small businesses as pillars of our economy and our communities. To help them thrive, we need to reduce the burden of regulations that are no longer necessary. Can the President of the Treasury Board provide an update on Bill S6 and how it will help Canadian businesses? The Honourable President of the Treasury Board. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague from Saint Laurent for her question and her advocacy in her community. Madam Speaker, the annual bills to modernize regulations are a key part of our work to improve the efficiency, especially when it comes to climate change, health and safety, and seniors. Bill S6 makes 40 changes to reduce the red tape and burden on companies and simplify regulatory processes. I hope all parties in the House will contribute to facilitating the task. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Madam Speaker, food banks can no longer meet the demand in my riding and all across Canada. Mr. Boutin from La Source in Beauce confirms that the demand is skyrocketing and winter isn't even here yet. The impact of inflation is already being felt, especially for young families and seniors, with high grocery prices and rising interest rates. A recession is on our doorstep. Madam Speaker, we want a real answer. When is this government going to suspend all new taxes? Enough's enough. The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to reassure my colleague the federal price on pollution does not apply in Quebec because Quebec has its own cap-and-trade system. It works totally differently from the carbon tax. Quebec's emissions are going down thanks to the cap, not because of the tax. So there will be no increase in Quebec. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Madam Speaker, this government ballooned our debt by over $100 billion even before COVID, then by $500 billion during COVID, of which $200 billion had absolutely zero to do with the pandemic. But now the finance minister has seen the light taken the advice of our leader and has brought in a pay-as-you-go policy. Canadians know they can't trust this finance minister and this costly coalition with the NDP when it comes to fiscal responsibility. Isn't that right, Madam Speaker?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madam Speaker, the finance minister has been seeing the light all through this crisis while the leader of the opposition was in the darkest corners of the internet searching for solutions on Bitcoin and recommending such things. We've actually been driving economic growth. In fact, it doesn't, I think that I would point out that it was 3.3% growth in the second quarter for Canada. France was 2.2, Germany 0.6, UK 0.9, US was actually negative 0.6. I would also point out, Madam Speaker, that we have seen a growth of 400,000 jobs since the lowest point, or since where we were before the pandemic began, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last week, the PS to the Minister for Public Safety said the following respecting the placement of defibrillators in RCMP vehicles, which would save 300 lives per year, and I quote, "If the Honourable Member had a private company that wanted to donate AEDs to all RCMP vehicles, I would be happy to work with him on that," end quote. My question, in the event that one or more outside parties agrees to pay the necessary $10 million, will the government finally place AEDs in all RCMP cruisers, as I've been asking them to do for the past 6 years?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
As a former executive director of the Heart and Stroke Foundation, I could not agree more with the thrust and the intent of the member's question, which is AED save lives. I would encourage everybody to get trained in CPR and make sure they know how to use AEDs. The government continues to look at how we can support public health efforts across the country to make sure that that knowledge about defibrillators, knowledge about CPR and AEDs, and that as the government has supported the placement of AEDs, can look for ways to do so in the future, and I thank the member for his question.
The Honourable Member for Avalon.
Madam Speaker, our government has been there for Atlantic Canadians every step of the way as we recover from hurricane devastation of Hurricane Fiona. Small craft harbours are the lifeblood of the economy for communities across Atlantic Canada. Can the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans share with the House how our government will continue to be there for fish harvesters and Atlantic Canadians?
Sure.
Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member from Avalon for his question and for his leadership and hard work. I've had the chance to see the damage from Fiona's destructive powers firsthand, and I heard just how critical our small craft harbours are for people and their communities and economies. So that's why I announced $100 million of federal support for immediate work to clean up harbours and to recover lost fishing gear. Mr. Speaker, DFO officials are working hard to make sure that harbours are operational when fishing seasons begin, and we will not stop until the job is done.
Member for Edmonton, Griesbach.
Madam Speaker, I hosted a housing town hall in my community of Edmonton-Griesbach last week, and my constituents told me that big real estate companies are buying up their homes, treating the housing market like a stock market, all while evicting regular working Canadians. This Liberal government has done nothing to close the tax loopholes these investors have saved a combined $1.5 billion of money from taxpayers in my community. Edmontonians are losing their homes. On the other hand, we have Conservatives who continue to buddy up with big corporations with no end in sight. When will this government act to stop rent evictions and...
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We know that speculative investments in real estate are contributing to pushing housing prices higher. That's why we've legislated an annual 1% tax on the value of non-resident, non-Canadian owned residential real estate and a 2-year ban on foreign investments in Canadian residential properties. We've also committed to reviewing the tax treatment of real estate investment trusts. We are committed to making housing affordable by doing our part to tackle the financialization of housing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Spadina, Fort York.
Madam Speaker, a report by economist Ross McKittrick has exposed the true cost of the government's clean fuel standard. This second carbon tax will increase per household energy costs up to 6.5% a year. That's an extra tax of $1,277 annually. With food inflation at 11.4% and families struggling to afford basic necessities, the government is going to make things worse, a lot worse. Madam Speaker, the government says this tax will reduce Canada's carbon intensity footprint. Will they admit it will be minimal at best and achieved on the backs of Canadians working in the bleak economy predicted by the Finance Minister?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the last 3 years, we've had the most costly forest fires in the history of Canada, the most costly floodings in the history of Canada, and now the most costly tropical storm in the history of Canada. Climate change is costing Canadians billions of dollars, and this is just a beginning unless we act. And unfortunately, the Conservative Party have no plan whatsoever. In fact, they want to make pollution free and they want to pay polluters to pay even more. Not on this side of the House, Madam Speaker. We will work to fight climate change and we will work to support Canadians. Thank you.
That is all the time for oral questions. I believe the Honourable Member for Regina Capel is rising on this point of order.
Question of. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am rising on a question of privilege today concerning misleading comments made in this House by the Minister of Emergency Preparedness. In late June, it came to light in evidence presented at the Mass Casualty Commission that the Liberal government was heavily involved in the RCMP's communications about the April 2020 Nova Scotia tragedy, which, as things would turn out, was followed mere days by a firearms announcement by the Prime Minister on May 1st, 2020. That involvement came to a head in a hastily arranged teleconference between RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki, other top brass at RCMP headquarters, and several Nova Scotia RCMP members, where those Nova Scotia officials were called out on the carpet. Contemporaneous notes of that teleconference taken by Superintendent Darren Campbell, well trained in documenting conversations as any veteran police officer would be, recorded that Commissioner Lucki spoke about a promise she had made to the minister and had linked its importance to that forthcoming Order in Council announcement. Understandably, the former Minister of Public Safety was vigorously questioned about those events here in the House. On June 21st, he said, at page 7094 of the debates, quote, "No direction on any operational matter was given to the Commissioner of the RCMP by me or any member of this government," end quote. The following day, the minister said at page 7140 of the debates, quote, "At no point did our government pressure or interfere with the operational decisions of the RCMP, including their communications strategy," end quote. Then on the last day of the spring sitting, June 23rd, he added, at page 7242 of the debates, quote, "Neither the Prime Minister's office nor the Minister of Public Safety's office had any role in interfering or pressuring the RCMP to make any operational decisions with respect to RCMP communications around the investigation," end quote. The Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security and the Mass Casualty Commission itself heard from several witnesses over the summer months about their recollections of that teleconference. For his part, the minister doubled down on his own position, saying unequivocally at the committee on July 25th, at page 1 of the evidence, quote, "I did not ask them to release any specific information, nor did I receive a promise for them to do so," end quote. Later in the meeting at page 5 of the evidence, the minister reiterated, quote, "I did not ask her to release that information. It wasn't required," end quote. In other evidence at the committee and commission, we heard Commissioner Lucki's claim that the minister's chief of staff was curious whether the types of firearms involved would be named in a press conference, and in turn the RCMP commissioner dutifully inquired whether that would be the case. She asserts she was so informed and passed the information back. When it didn't come to pass, we are supposed to believe that she felt embarrassed for having given the minister wrong information and convened the teleconference with senior Nova Scotia RCMP officials to address the miscommunication. Subsequently, it was revealed that this conference call had been recorded by Dan Bryan, an issues management advisor with the RCMP and a former longtime Liberal staffer, including serving as communications director to the previous public safety minister, Ralph Goodale. Lo and behold, those recordings had gone missing. Nonetheless, they were recovered somehow. Just yesterday, the recordings of this conversation and transcripts of them were published by the Mass Casualty Commission. That has shed a much brighter light on the infamous April 28, 2020 teleconference. In the transcript titled Audio File 3 of 3, recorded 2020-04-28 at 8:48:57 p.m., the Commissioner is quoted at lines 15 to 17 on page 1 as saying, quote, "The little one line that I needed to be put into Darren's speaking notes, how did it get to me that that one line was going to be in his speaking notes, and it wasn't?" Keywords there, Madam Speaker, are one line that I needed to be put in. It's pertinent because, as we know, the claim had been made that innocent questions had been asked by or on behalf of the Minister. In fact, the Commissioner offered this explanation of the Minister's interest in this issue in the following exchange with the Liberal member for Fleetwood Port Kells at page 24 of the Evidence for the Public Safety Committee's July 25th meeting. Quote, this is the question. A critical piece here is when the question was asked. Was the question asked if it would be disclosed, or did they ask for it to be disclosed? Commissioner Brenda Lucki responds, "To my recollection, like I said at the very beginning, it's if the weapons information would be included," end quote. Now, clearly it wasn't mere curiosity whether the guns would be named. It was a line the Commissioner needed to be put in, to use her own words. But was it at her own behest or on behalf of someone higher up, Madam Speaker? You must recall that the Minister told the House on June 23rd that the government had not played, quote, any role with respect to RCMP communications. Now, turning back to the transcript, I would refer the Chair to lines 19 and 20 on page 2. Quote, "Yet I got hit again, not being able to come through for the Minister on the simplest of requests," end quote. Now, lest you might think it's ambiguous from that question whether the Commissioner may have been meaning simply to do a big favor for the Minister, but this next quote should leave the House with no doubt. I would now cite the transcript titled Audio File 1 of 3, recorded 2020-04-28 at 8:34 p.m. at lines 11 and 12 on page 1. We read the Commissioner saying, quote, "Flew it up the flagpole because it was a request that I got from the Minister's office." There we have it, Madam Speaker. The request came from the Minister's office. But what was that request? That one line the Commissioner needed to have added, you might ask. It was to pre-position, as communications folks would say, for the May 1st, 2020 Liberal firearms announcement. Referring to the transcript title Audio File 2 of 3, recorded on 2020-04-28 at 8:42 p.m., we read at lines 10 to 15 on page 2, quote, "Does anybody realize what's going on in the world of handguns and guns right now? The fact that they're in the middle of trying to get legislation going is the key point." That is the quote from that testimony, Madam Speaker, and I'll just read it again very quickly. "Does anybody realize what's going on in the world of handguns and guns right now? The fact that they're in the middle of trying to get legislation going." There is the direct link between the government's partisan political agenda and the interference in an active investigation into a tragic shooting that left 22 innocent Canadians dead. The RCMP on the ground had reason not to release that information. The government is putting political pressure on those officers to release that information, which could have jeopardized their ongoing efforts to track the events that led to the tragic shooting. This June, Madam Speaker, the Minister asserted that there was no direction, interference, or pressure. If the Minister were to come down to the House and say that what I just quoted to you doesn't add up to that, the next quotations I will offer should remove any ambiguity about the nature or tone of that so-called request from the Minister's office. Recall that at the July 25th Public Safety Committee meeting, the Commissioner tried to brush off the urgency of these details coming out, answering the Liberal member for Fleetwood Port Kells when he asked why it was important that this information be released at page 25 of the evidence. Quote, "It wasn't important whether or not it was released," end quote. The Commissioner may have been on message with the Minister's own committee statement, but the teleconference recording would prove them both wrong. At lines 31 to 33 of page 2 of the transcript of Audio File 3, Commissioner Lucki is documented saying, quote, "I already have a request sitting in my phone that the Minister wants to speak with me, and I know exactly what it's going to be about. And I can't even, I can't, there's not much I can say except that once again, I dropped the ball. So that's going to be the fourth time I'm going to say to him, end quote. Yet she had already made one apology to the minister about her dropping the ball on pre-positioning for the Liberal gun announcement. At lines 39 to 41 of page 1 of the transcript of audio file 1, the RCMP commissioner says, and I quote, "It's pretty difficult when you have to tell. I have apologized to the minister. I'm waiting for the Prime Minister to call me so I can apologize," end quote. Apologize for what? For not including that information that the Liberal government decided would help them in a partisan way, despite the impact it may have on an ongoing police investigation. Turns out that it was very, very important that the firearms information be released, Madam Speaker, despite what both the minister and the commissioner told the committee. Let me put all these pieces together into one succinct summary. The RCMP commissioner is now on tape saying that she needed a line to be put in press conference remarks about an RCMP investigation in order to be able to, quote, come through for the minister on, quote, the simplest of requests to accommodate information relevant to soon-to-be announced firearms laws. Not having succeeded and not being satisfied with one apology, the minister was on the line looking for accountability because the commissioner had dropped the ball. The minister's comments to the House in June simply do not hold water. There is no other way to put it. He has misled this House, and he and the Commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police have both misled the Public Safety Committee. Now, it is a well-established principle here that to make out a prima facie case of privilege in relation to a claim of misleading the House, 3 elements must be established. Firstly, it must be proven that the statement was misleading. Well, the recordings and the transcripts taken in their entirety baldly contradict the minister's own assertions on the floor of the House in June. Secondly, it must be established that the member making the statement knew it to be misleading. Well, the RCMP commissioner herself said in these recordings that the minister had asked to speak to her and, quote, I know exactly what it's going to be about, end quote. And we know exactly what it was about, Madam Speaker. Thirdly, the misleading statement must have been offered with the intention to mislead the House. In June, when the revelations about this conference call first broke, the minister was under a political firestorm here in the House. He was in full-on damage control mode. In the circumstances, there is no other way to view his comments other than as an attempt to be a wet blanket to smother yet another political scandal of this Liberal government interfering in investigations, in police investigations, criminal investigations for political advantage. It is my respectful submission, Madam Speaker, that the 3-part test concerning misleading the House has been satisfied. As Mr. Speaker Milliken ruled on February 1st, 2002 at page 8581 of the debates, quote, I believe that both the minister and the honourable members recognize that two versions of events have been presented to the House. On the basis of the arguments presented by honourable members and in view of the gravity of the matter, I have concluded that the situation before us where the House is left with 2 versions of events is one that merits further consideration by an appropriate committee, if only to clear the air, end quote. The air here certainly needs to be cleared, Mr. Speaker. The stench must be purged, even if the minister heeds Conservative calls to resign. Finally, before concluding, there is one potential hurdle the Liberals might try to identify, which I want to address up front, and that is that the Mass Casualty Commission's recordings and transcripts have not yet been formally placed before the House. However, I would refer you to the decision of Mr. Speaker Jerome on December 6, 1978, at page 1856 of the debates, where a prima facie case of privilege was established in relation to misleading information on the strength of evidence which was given before the Royal Commission of Inquiry into certain activities of the RCMP, also known as the MacDonald Commission. Today's circumstances are frankly no different. In both cases, we have evidence from an RCMP commissioner given to a Royal Commission established under the Inquiries Act, which contradicts the information which is before the House. Just as Mr. Speaker Jerome was prepared to find a prima facie case of privilege then, I believe that you too can and must find one in the present circumstances to allow the House to address the misleading claims of the Minister of Emergency Preparedness. And I would just remind you, Mr. Speaker, and I remind all honourable members, we are not expecting the Speaker himself to make this determination. We're not expecting the Speaker himself to rule unilaterally that the Minister is in contempt of the House or that the Minister deliberately misled the House. All we are asking the Speaker to do is to allow the House to come to that decision, to make its own decision on this issue. The role of the Speaker is not to make this determination all on his own. The role of the Speaker is to decide whether or not this rises to the level of allowing the House to study the matter and the House itself to pronounce on whether or not the minister is in contempt or has deliberately misled the House. And the gravity of this situation should not be forgotten, Mr. Speaker. We're not simply pointing out a time when the minister was caught up with a contradiction about a minor issue or got some details wrong. We're talking about the allegations that in the middle of an ongoing investigation, mere days after a tragic shooting, that this government was putting political pressure on the RCMP communications around the issue. The RCMP officers who were conducting the investigation felt that releasing the specific information around the firearms that were used in the shooting could jeopardize their ability to find out where these firearms came from or other details around the case. It was their discretion, their expertise, that led them to the conclusion that they should not divulge that information at that time in the investigation. For their own partisan political purposes, the government broke all bounds of decency and violated that independence between the executive branch of government and our national police force, all for their political gain. That's why this situation rises to the level of justifying a finding of, at least at first glance, a breach of privilege. And should you find that we are correct in this assertion, Mr. Speaker, I would be prepared to move the appropriate motion. Thank you.
I would thank you to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for raising this. The presidency will study this, or rather the speakership will study this. I now give the floor.
And we'll have the opportunity to peruse what the member has put on the record, and we'll get back to the speaker at a timely fashion. Thank you.
On the same subject, I imagine the Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Congratulations for your appointment. For the New Democrats, this is an important subject. I'd like to look at the Hansard, and if we can't do it in the next 2 hours, I would like to come back to this at the next sitting of the House of Commons. Thank you.
C'est bien noté.
It is noted. Thank you. We will now move on. Tabling of documents.
Dépôt de projet de loi émanant du gouvernement.
Tabling of government bills.
Déclaration de
statements by ministers.
Rapport de délégation interparlementaire.
Presenting reports from interparliamentary delegations.
Présentation.
Presenting reports from committees.
Dépôt de
introduction of private members' bills.
Première.
First reading of Senate public bills.
Motion.
Motions.
Présentation de pétitions.
Presenting petitions.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.